always have my 4 Qs: quickly, quantity, quality, and then I know it's not a Q, but if you put a squeaky clean, they're my kind of 4 top things. So cleanliness, again, coming back to the hygiene, cleanliness, because if that colostrum is dirty, so if the bucket is dirty, the teats are dirty, whatever you're putting maybe the colostrum into a teat feeder afterwards, if that's dirty, then all the bugs in that colostrum are going to be competing for the antibodies in the gut.
Hello, I'm Emma-Louise Coffey, and you're welcome to the Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. Hazell Mullins, vet on the move, joins us to give advice to manage herd health on dairy farms. Her top tips for spring. But first, she gives insight into life farming in partnership with her father on their dairy farm in County Cork and her work in her veterinary practice.
So I am in partnership with my dad on the dairy farm at home here in Carricknavar, and we are going to be milking about 63 cows this year. And then I also run a large animal locum business, and I locum generally kind of in the North Cork area. I do a lot in Mitchellstown and kind of Fermoy area. So really enjoying that. So it's generally doing a lot of TB testing and calls, and I do a little bit of night work as well. For the spring, I tend to be at home with Dad, calving cows, but I do a little bit still during the spring as well. And then I'm also the current president of Veterinary Ireland. So that's a huge role for me this year in 2024. So that keeps me busy as well.
And I guess to take a step back, Hazell, where I first came across you was social media, where you were bringing us along with you on those call outs that you talk about. Like one of the most interesting things for me was you were helping us identify sick animals, I suppose, giving a list of the ailments, and one of those kind of quick fire question boxes, what do you think it is? And I'll be honest, I didn't always get it right, but, there was an element of learning from your, what you were sharing and what you were seeing on farms. Was that always a thing that you liked doing?
Yeah, so that really took off in about 2018, 2019. And it was basically because I wanted to share what I was doing every day. And I was kind of sending pictures to my friends who are definitely not into farming. And, a lot of them live in Cork City, and they were amazed by a lot of the things I was seeing. So I said, maybe there is something in this. So I started my Instagram page properly, probably start 2019, and sharing just things that I thought were, maybe run-of-the-mill things that I see every day. And then there was obviously more exciting things. But yeah, just kind of being interactive and asking the questions, asking the polls. Even my friends that aren't from farming backgrounds know what milk fever is now. And it's great that there's a knowledge out there as well about kind of diseases and how to recognize, kind of classic clinical signs. And yeah, I really enjoyed the interaction. And
I guess then, part of that, I see that as one thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in more recent years, farmers and vets are working together. And, I really think there's a proactive approach to animal health on farms rather than the reactive firefighting nature of, I suppose, regular vet visits because there's sick animals on farm. And rather we're moving towards, maintaining healthy herds. And, it's the TB test is the main reason why the vet is out. And then, there are some other issues on farm throughout the year. Is that something that you were seeing? Like, you mentioned the Instagram and it's giving you a lot of FaceTime with people. But outside of that, your dealings with farmers in call outs or, just in practice, is that a thing?
Yes, so I think it's gone definitely. Look, firefighting will always be there. There'll always be emergency calls. There'll always be a need for, the surgeries every now and again and the sick cow calls. But I definitely see there's definitely been a shift. Even in the last 10 years, I qualified in 2013 from Nottingham. I started working down in Kerry, and then I moved to kind of different practices around Cork. And definitely there's been a shift to more kind of herd health. I know that's a real buzzword at the moment, but it is, farmers are being a lot more proactive, getting diagnostics on the farm. Like that's a huge benefit to knowing what diseases are the risk on the farm, what minerals deficiencies may be there. Soil sampling has really helped, silage sampling. We kind of can envisage now, kind of predict whether there's going to be issues, metabolic issues like calcium deficiencies, magnesium, all of the, selenium, all of these things that we can envisage happening. And I think even doing things like diagnostic transition cow bloods, a lot of farmers now really want to know, are they feeding their cows right in that transition period? Is there, ketones, NEFAs? Are we getting subclinical milk fevers that we're not aware of? I think diagnostics really has opened up the world of veterinary now and farming to predicting disease and preventing disease. And it's a really exciting time to be a vet, actually, because there's nearly a new diagnostic, on-farm diagnostic kit coming out every 1 or 2 years now. So it's really moved on even in the last 10 years since I qualified.
And you mentioned diagnostics, and then, large amounts of information, be it your soil, silage sampling, managing cows better. Is there, a few top things that you see people doing really well in that space of herd health, or things that farmers should be doing, to get to there?
Yeah, so I think there's a real data. People really like their data and looking at ICBF and really utilising that. And every farmer has an ICBF page, and they should really have their vet involved in that. And you can nominate your local vet to be able to see your data right there in real time, looking at your milk recordings, looking at your genetics, looking at, mastitis records, all of these things that are right there, ready to use. And it's I really see farmers really utilising that. Yes, there's farmers that need to do it more, and it's always time is the probably limiting factor there. But even if like once a week, you could really look at the especially after getting a milk recording, really sit down and go through it and see what's going on, and identify cows that may be, issues with high cell counts and things like that, and discuss with your vet the data that you're looking at. I think diagnostics, yes, I think farmers are excellent with their bulk milks, and I think it's a really good general overview of health on the farm. And it can also really highlight when there's a disease maybe creeping into the farm as well, and it can show that the antibodies titers going up maybe from test to test, and that's not there to be ignored. That really is there to be discussed with your vet and see, okay, is there a vaccination program that could be brought in for, I don't know, example, salmonella? Is it creeping up in the titers? Are you vaccinating? Then, really we should be probably thinking of implementing something if there's warning signs there. And then hygiene, I think, is my last non-negotiable. I think it's a very basic thing. Again, weather is as I'm farming as well, I know that, God, sometimes the weather really isn't on our sides, and there's just muck everywhere. But look, if things can be kept as clean as possible, cubicle liming, cleaning them down twice a day, liming twice a day, calf sheds, cleaning them out between calvings, or else trying to do your best in between calvings. I know there's some farms that are calving 20 cows a day at the moment, and it can be very hectic, but it is just trying to keep the basics of hygiene. And I know it's probably like a broken record now from vets talking about it, but as a vet and a farmer, I know that it's not easy to keep things spotless, but as long as you're doing your best, and I think that's the main thing.
And the hygiene one, it sounds so basic, but as you say, there are lots of factors at play on farm, like weather is a big one. A lot of rain on the way apparently in the forecast. So it is to keep on top of these things, because once I suppose you let them slide, then that becomes the norm and it leads to bigger issues. You mentioned vaccines, Hazel, and I suppose if we look at a dairy discussion group, if you're sitting in to review financials for the year, veterinary costs in terms of things like vaccinations are totally variable. And you'll see some farms are maybe less than €10 per cow. So vaccinating for very little or nothing at all. And then you see some farms who are up at €30 per cow. So they're hitting all the vaccines. I suppose from your experience and your background, is there a role for a good vaccination program on farm?
There definitely is. And it does differ from farm to farm. And I've been on farms where, they don't vaccinate for anything, probably maybe just blackleg, for example, or they might just vaccinate for lepto and nothing else. And look, I've been on farms that look, they get away with that and that's fine, like as long as they're monitoring what's going on farm. But I do think then I have been on the other end where I've been on farms that haven't vaccinated for certain diseases and they do come in, and the financial implications of that are huge. A salmonella outbreak, abortions, lepto, zoonotic, like lepto is a zoonotic disease as well. So you're protecting yourself as well. Salmonella, we can get salmonella as well. So there's a lot of factors, you have to think of the health of the farmer as well, the health of the cow, and looking at those diagnostics like bulk milk sampling is a great example of how we can, I mentioned it before, the warning signs, but sitting down with your vet, making sure that you're kind of looking at your farm as a whole. Are you a closed herd? Are you sending heifers off to be heifer reared? Are they going to be mixed with other groups from different herds? Are they going to have different neighbours where they're going? Is there an outside farm? Do you know the history of the farm next door? Look, all of these play a huge factor in the risk of vaccination versus not vaccinating. So I don't think it's as straightforward as, just every farm should be the same. Like we vaccinate for, everything pretty much on the farm. And look, that's because there was warning signs on my bulk milks a couple of years ago for IBR, for salmonella. We've always actually vaccinated for salmonella. And it's just that peace of mind as well. For us, I think I like to know that my cows are protected. And yes, but every farm is different. And that's why the role of the vet with the farmer, chatting, looking at diagnostics, looking at your system is so important.
And a really interesting point you bring to the table there, Hazel. You talk about the risk to the farmer. And of course, we forget that. And it is a thing, we always look after the animal, but what about ourselves? And there is a risk of transmitting these diseases to ourselves, but also the peace of mind, and that's a really interesting thing, because you mentioned the worst case scenario and the financial implications, and that really weighs heavy on farmers. And I suppose an abortion storm from a disease outbreak, in the month of December, January, can be incredibly stressful and hugely impactful on the herd and the farmer themselves.
Oh, huge. And that'll impact then on the busy spring ahead. And it just becomes one big, headache and, mentally as well. Our farm last year was struck with a kind of a dose of scour in March when that bad weather came. And it was my first year being full time on the farm. And it really affected me. Like I really was down. I was stressed. And, this year now, I really I'm doing everything I can to prevent that happening again. And look, sometimes no matter how vigilant you are and how good with colostrum and hygiene and everything, things just don't go your way. And that's okay too. And it's not something to be, ashamed of. And I was a bit embarrassed, I suppose, last year, because I'm also a vet, and I was a bit embarrassed that I had, that we had a crypto outbreak. But look, I just had to get on and pull myself out of the misery and get through it and try to make sure that all the calves that were born afterwards were given the best chance of preventing the disease. And just mind yourselves. It's a really, really busy time. Like I've been both, busy with veterinary in spring and now busy with farming in spring. And it's much of a muchness. Like we're all in an industry where we have to mind our mental health and mind our sleep and food and nutrition. And just, I think sometimes we can definitely put all the animals before ourselves, but remember that we need to be there on the ground. So mind yourselves.
When you talk about, I suppose you're taking a proactive approach to it at home, and you're I suppose, analysing the trend on the bulk milk sample and, I suppose, reacting to that and putting the plan in place. But for things like the BVD vaccine, I was talking with a group of students last week and we were talking about the different vaccines, and BVD was one that came up, and I suppose we had no definitive answer, so maybe you can help with that. See, I'm a farmer, I'm ear notching, for the last number of years. I'm, I suppose, consistently getting negative tests. Is it a thing that I should be vaccinating even though I suppose the offspring from the dairy herd is coming back negative?
So there's been so much work done over the last, I think it's 2013 it all started, and there has been a huge reduction in BVD in the country, which is a testament to everyone involved and the farmers and the department and vets and everyone. But it is a thing, whereas if you're not vaccinating, our animals are naive. So I've seen it across bulk samples that the naivety of Irish herds now to BVD is a serious, it is there. They haven't been exposed to it. So if they are exposed for whatever reason, if there's a PI comes into the herd or through a neighbouring herd, it is something that could spread rapidly through the herd. So it is looking again at your farm system and looking at doing a risk assessment with your vet. Are you a closed herd? Are you sending animals elsewhere and they're coming back to your farm? Are you buying in a lot of replacements? So I do think it is a farm dependent, and talking to your vet is key again.
And then say, there are time frames in which we would administer a vaccine. How important is that to, I suppose, nail it on farm? And, is there wiggle room to, plus or minus 2 weeks, plus or minus a month?
I think there's a lot of research, there is a lot of research gone into the development of vaccines, like a vaccine. I think the newest crypto vaccine, for instance, I think is 23 years in development. So what it says on the data sheet is there because it has been proven that's the best way to give the vaccine. So realistically, it should be, if you can, send reminders on your phone, put it in the calendars, to that the booster is needed in the 3 or 4 weeks, whichever is recommended. If you are over, have a chat with your vet as well and kind of get their opinion. They can also ring the company, get their opinion. But if we can, we really do need to stick to the data sheet, because that's what's proven to give the best immune stimulus to the cow or to the calf. Storage of vaccines as well. I do think if you're going to the vet to get your vaccines, try to come home straight away. Don't go into the supermarket and do the shopping or go to the farm shop. Try and go straight home, put them in the fridge. The door of the fridge is a really good place to put the vaccines, because it's kind of that ambient temperature. It's not going to be freezing. Sometimes you see the ice building up at the back of a fridge. Like, the last thing you want to do is freeze a vaccine. It has to be kept, at that kind of 2 to 5 degrees recommendation, and making sure that your fridge is working as well. I know this is a simple thing, but a lot of farm fridges are perhaps fridges that have been taken out of houses that weren't performing as well as they should have been. So it's making sure that fridge is working on farm as well. I know in my fridge here in the kitchen, I definitely have a few vaccines in the shelf on the door, which my husband probably isn't too fond of. But I definitely think that storage is key, and also giving it at the right time, especially when you're looking at giving kind of scour vaccines as well, 3 to 12 weeks prior to calving. That's really important. So maybe at this time of year, people might be batching their later calvers and giving them their scour vaccine. That's a really good idea as well. And just making sure that you're administrating it correctly. If it says into the muscle, give it into the muscle, perhaps with a little longer needle, and under the skin, then make sure that you're getting it under the skin, and again, maybe a little shorter needle for that type of vaccine.
I really like that idea. You talk about the reminder on the phone, and I suppose people go through to the effort and time of sitting down and creating that herd health plan, and in that there is a guideline in terms of when to administer, and the simple reminder that will pop up on your phone from your calendar. It just, I suppose, gives you that that nudge to do it. Funny about the storage of vaccines, a vet told me previously that the amount of Jeeps that you will see at the mart with the brown paper bag with the vaccines in it on the windscreen. So absolutely I suppose the proper protocol around it for maximum effectiveness is important. I'm aware this now is possibly becoming a very vaccine conversation, but the final point, some people are in the situation where they found in the last 2 to 3 years, the availability of vaccines is an issue. So they're not actually getting they're getting the, say, I suppose, full complement for the herd. Is that a problem you've come across, Hazell, and what is the reason for it?
Yeah, there has been a few different vaccines over the last kind of year or two that have been more difficult to get. And look, it's due to different reasons, different, I suppose, batch failures in the manufacturing or failure of the production in some shape or form, and it is out of our control sometimes, and it is trying to make the best of those situations and putting down your name in your vet to get on a list for when they do come in is a good thing to do. Being proactive, I just don't think that just because a vaccine is short supply, again, it's out of your control, but it is in your control to make sure that you're on a list, that when it does come in, that you are the first to be notified and not just give up on the whole thing. It is so important to keep going. Like if there is a disease risk on the farm, or for that peace of mind that, that we just don't give up because it's not available. It will be available at some stage. And perhaps, look, that some herds might have to go in with a second shot to booster if it has gone over a certain time limit. But again, discussing that with your vet, discussing it with the manufacturers of the vaccine. And it's something that happens, and it's something just not to sit back and just be like, oh, sure, I can't do it, it's not there. It is really being proactive about it and trying to work with your vet and trying to get on a list that when it does come in, that you're going to be rung, and it's going to be you're going to be able to vaccinate as soon as possible.
So I suppose to change tack a little bit, Hazell, you mentioned that you've seen the dairy farm in the springtime from the farmer lens over the last number of years on call, and you're also now in the situation this year and last year, doing the spring at home. We're in mid-February now, and it is, the real crunch time. You mentioned, some farmers have a huge volume of cows calving within a 24-hour period. What are the key challenges that, you've experienced? I think
that labour and help on a farm is always going to be a huge factor in especially the bigger dairies. And I can see, look, I suppose on my farm, there's myself and my dad, and my uncle is on the farm as well. So we're very lucky to have that help there. So I do find that perhaps, look, especially at this kind of early spring stage, there's lots of calves arriving, and then the diseases are probably further down the line. So it's kind of that spot now that you're in where you're kind of like, okay, everything is going okay. And then problems arise then when the infection pressure basically rises above what the immunity of those calves can withstand. So it is making sure that the system within the farm is working to the best ability. Like, is there a system that, each calf, when it's born, it's getting its colostrum, it's moving to a pen, then it moves to another pen? Is there a system where you kind of can keep track of all the calves and make sure that they're all being treated the same and all getting the same basic requirement of colostrum and also hygiene, your navels, all of that? And I think just making sure that the system, like the sheds, are working for you. Is there any improvements that can be made? Look, it's not an easy answer, Emma-Louise. I do think that people are doing their best. And again, it's that's not, perfection is probably never going to be there, but it's that strive to perfection. It's always trying to improve. It's always trying to improve on last year and trying to improve on the system on the farm. And I know that's not as easy as it sounds. And as a dairy farmer now, as it definitely kind of, it's opened my eyes to even though you have the best of intentions with all your animals, sometimes lack of sleep or, you know, a mad cow or something that's gone wrong in the night that you can't do exactly what you plan to do. It happens. And just minding yourself as well is the main thing. And safety is always the thing, because the last thing you want is to do something that causes injury and then you're not there, and then that's even more stressful. So just making sure that the whole shed is working well for you is my biggest tip, I think.
And you mentioned the calves, and we would have chatted with a dairy advisor from Wexford, Kay O'Connell, last week, and I suppose there was a big focus on calves and, you know, their naivety to disease and their vulnerability. You talk about colostrum. I suppose putting your vet hat on, we would hear it a lot from Emer Kennedy and Moore Park, but, you know, maybe the process for colostrum management and feeding in that early stage in the newborn calf's life.
Yeah, so it is very important to be giving it within the 2 hours. So I always have my 4 Qs: quickly, quantity, quality, and then I know it's not a Q, but if you put a squeaky clean, they're my kind of 4 top things. So cleanliness, again, coming back to the hygiene, cleanliness, because if that colostrum is dirty, so if the bucket is dirty, the teats are dirty, whatever you're putting maybe the colostrum into a teat feeder afterwards, if that's dirty, then all the bugs in that colostrum are going to be competing for the antibodies in the gut. So there's receptors in the gut, and the bacteria actually compete with those receptors. So even though you could have the best quality, you know, over 22% bricks on your refractometer, but and if the hygiene isn't good, I think that's a real factor. I'm sure, look, we're all very much aware of, you know, your 3 to 4 litres within 2 hours, ideally. But I think the cleanliness is a big thing, and a big thing of mine actually at the moment is noticing, actually, now that I'm dealing with colostrum and feeding calves daily with colostrum, how easy it is for dirt to get into that bucket. And, you know, cows are you know, calving, there's straw, there's a lot going on. But really focusing on the cleanliness, and that's my kind of big colostrum thing now at the moment is not to let those bacteria multiply. Keep it in a fridge. Don't throw it out, even if it's been in the fridge for 48 hours, and make sure that fridge is working as well. And just the bacteria, watch it, because colostrum is a lovely medium for bacteria to grow. They really do enjoy it.
And how soon after you milk the cow should you be refrigerating if you're not using the full amount to feed a calf?
Oh, like within an hour, I would say. You know, once you've put it into a container, a clean container, I don't think there should be any real delay putting it into the fridge and feeding the calf. Then when you heating it up, then accordingly, never using any microwaves, just using a water bath to heat the colostrum, and because you'll destroy the antibodies, all the goodness, if you overheat it or put it into a microwave. So just putting it in basic, like you would if you're having a cup of tea. You put the milk back in the fridge. It really isn't rocket science, and it's just making sure you're doing the basics right.
And you mentioned denaturing, and not to get too technical, but temperature for heating colostrum. Yeah,
I definitely wouldn't be kind of, I suppose, around the 40-degree mark of water in a water bath would be ideal, kind of in around the body temperature, kind of 37 to 40 degrees. Anything over kind of the 50-degree mark will denature the proteins.
And just to finally to touch on a point that you made earlier in the conversation, you talked about your role in Veterinary Ireland. So you've taken on the president's role late last year. I know it's slightly outside of the farmers' remit, but what is that about? And I suppose, what does that involve for you, Hazel?
Yes, so I became the president of Veterinary Ireland in November last year, and it's a role that I feel it was the right time for me to take on. It's basically that Veterinary Ireland is an organisation that represents vets in Ireland. We're also a trade union, and we basically give a voice to our members.
And I suppose with vets, we all need them. And, when we talk about the farm team, they're a very important player if you laid out, say, you're 15. But say, I suppose, often there's a vet leaves a practice, there can be shortages. But where is veterinary as a career at? And I suppose the number of vets on the ground as you see it.
So there definitely is a recruitment and retention issue at the moment in practices, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners will have met their own local vet and they've mentioned this to them, and it is it's worrying at the moment, and we do need to encourage the right people into veterinary, and it's trying to get into schools and trying to give education to students that what a veterinary is, and opening their eyes to, I suppose, the challenges. There's on call, there's working with animals, there's also working with people as well. So you do have to deal with people, you have to deal with animals, you have to work late nights. And it is kind of just making sure that the right people are going into veterinary. And it is a really rewarding, I love being a vet, a really rewarding profession. And there's so many avenues that you can take and opportunities within the profession. And I think it's just trying to promote it in a positive light. And it's hopefully exciting year ahead with hopefully an announcement about a new vet school at some stage. And it would be wonderful to, keep some of the students that are travelling abroad currently within Ireland and not to be, I suppose, exporting our students and trying to, supply a course within the island of Ireland that will be the future of veterinary and alongside all the other veterinary courses. So it's exciting time, and hopefully that maybe some listeners today, they might be interested in becoming vets in the future, or have children that might take on the profession. And it's as I said, I love it myself, and it's just promoting it and making sure that the right people are going into it.
For sure. This has been a really insightful conversation, Hazell. I think, taking a step back and looking at the whole system, your idea of using your data, diagnostics and hygiene as big picture stuff in terms of getting herd health right on farms. And you do acknowledge that there are emergencies and there are problems that will arise despite best efforts at times. Also then looking to the springtime in particular, looking at the care of the newborn calf with your 4 Qs and cleanliness, is really, really key things to contain disease risk. And finally, to touch on, I suppose, your exciting role and the very best to look for the year ahead as President of Vet Ireland. Thank you, Hazell.
Thank you, Emma-Louise.
That's it for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast. And my thanks to Hazell Mullins for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to rate, review, and listen on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Emma-Louise Coffey, and join me next time for your Dairy Edge.